bringing Korea's spirit to the world. A beautiful culture, connecting heart to heart. We now strive to safeguard Taekwondo's community training culture as a treasured heritage for all humanity. The pride of Korea, Taekwondo.
South Korea sweltered through another day of extreme heat on Friday, with the temperatures nearing 40 degrees Celsius in parts of the country. Some relief is expected tomorrow, as heavy rain along the East Coast is forecast to ease the heat. U.S. President Donald Trump has imposed new tariffs and minimum import prices on polysilicon-related products, with the impact on Korean firms likely to vary depending on their manufacturing strategies. And U.S. President Donald Trump says he expects the war with Iran to end soon, while acknowledging that the U.S. military is facing shortages of some weapons. We begin with the extreme heat gripping South Korea. The heat wave reached its peak today, with the temperatures here in Seoul climbing above 40 degrees Celsius. Our Jo Young-eun starts us off.
As the relentless heat continues across the nation, Seoul saw temperatures climb above 40 degrees Celsius on Friday. Friday actually marked Ipchu, the traditional beginning of autumn on the lunar calendar, but the heat was anything but fall-like. According to the Korea Meteorological Administration, Nowon-gu district in northeastern Seoul was at 40.2 degrees Celsius at around 3 p.m.
The current temperature in Seoul is 36 degrees Celsius, while the ground temperature is 60 degrees Celsius. Let's take a look ourselves how fast this chocolate melts in the intense heat today.
With the higher heat index confirmed by the infrared thermometer, our chocolate melted almost instantly, while a cup of ice melted within just a couple of minutes under the scorching heat. At 11 a.m., the Korea Meteorological Administration issued severe heat wave warnings for Gyeongsangbuk-do Province, Gangwon-do Province, and parts of the southwest. Temperatures approached 40 degrees in many other areas as well, including Yeongwol, Yeoju, and Mirang. The highest temperature recorded nationwide with 40.8 degrees in Hanam, while Gwangyang was at 40.2 degrees. According to the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency on Friday, 185 people were treated with heat-related illnesses nationwide the previous day. This brings the total number of cases reported by the agency's heat-related illness surveillance system, which began operating in mid-May, to 2,872, with 23 deaths reported. The extreme heat is expected to ease somewhat over the weekend, as the severe heat wave warning has been lifted as of 6 p.m. on Friday. But hot weather will continue while heavy rain is forecast along the East Coast.
Over the weekend, temperatures will remain around 35 degrees Celsius in areas west of the Taebeksan Mountains, as easterly winds continue to bring hot weather. Some areas may also experience tropical nights.
Tropical nights are also becoming more frequent. The number of days when overnight temperatures stayed above 25 degrees Celsius has reached 13 so far this year in Seoul, the highest figure on record. Jo Young-eun, Arirang News.
As the scorching heat continues, more people are heading indoors to escape the sweltering weather. With shopping, dining, and entertainment under all one roof, malls are becoming a go-to summer retreat for visitors of all ages. Our Hong Seo-jung has more.
People are lining up one after another to enter the theater. As showtime approaches, more and more visitors are rushing inside. Even though it's a weekday morning, the theater is filled with people seeking refuge from the heat.
I think watching a movie in a spacious, comfortable indoor setting is probably the best way to deal with this kind of heat and humidity.
Rather than traveling long distances for a summer getaway, many visitors say going to the theater is their preferred way to beat the heat.
It's definitely much better than staying at home. I don't really want to go too far, so somewhere close by is perfect.
The theater is located inside the massive shopping mall. 3 floors below, giant character balloons soar above the atrium. A themed pop-up store has become another popular attraction, drawing families and children on their summer break.
It's air-conditioned, there are plenty of dining options, and lots of activities for kids. That's why I'd recommend spending the day at the mall.
With something for everyone to enjoy, the mall is attracting a wide range of visitors. Families with children are flocking to the pop-up attractions, while other shoppers take the opportunity to browse the stores.
I think we'll check out some pop-up stores with the kids, do some shopping, and then head home. It's a great place for the whole family.
As lunchtime approaches, diners flock to the food court where cold dishes such as naengmyeon or Korean cold noodles help cool down the heat. From July 27th to August 6th, average daily attendance stood at about 55,000 on weekdays and 110,000 on weekends. The first weekend of August alone attracted around 220,000 visitors, up 10% from the first weekend of the previous month. As the weather outside is baking hot, indoor spots like malls and movie theaters seem to be popular places to hang out this summer. Hong Sa-jung, Arirang News.
Now, despite the blistering heat, many are still heading to the beach in search of some relief from these scorching summer temperatures. Our Shin So-eun tells us more.
The beach remained lively under a pale blue, almost cloudless sky. With extreme heat advisories and tropical night warnings issued across much of the country, many are escaping to Eurwangni Beach in Incheon, one of the closest summer getaway from Seoul. By 1 p.m., temperature surged up to 35 degrees Celsius, and the extreme heat makes me want to dive into the water as well. But for many visitors, escaping the heat seems much more manageable. Cool seawater and refreshing ocean breezes offer a brief respite for beachgoers looking to beat the heat.
It's one of the closest beaches for us, and I hadn't been here in a while, so I wanted to come back. The weather is really nice today. It feels cool, there's a good breeze, and the timing is just right.
We're visiting from China, and we think the scenery here is really beautiful. The beach is lovely, and the sand feels very nice too.
While today marks Ipchu, the traditional start of autumn on the Korean calendar, the summer heat is showing little sign of easing. More than 20,000 people reportedly visited the beach last weekend alone, with even larger crowds expected as the peak summer vacation season continues through early August. Experts say water removes heat from the body far more efficiently than air, meaning a swim in the sea can quickly cool the skin and help lower body temperature. With safety guidelines in place, many beachgoers are floating on tubes while others are speeding across the water on jet boards, making the most of the summer conditions. But as changing tides can noticeably shift both the shoreline and water depth, visitors are advised to stay alert. As of Friday, high tide came shortly after 10 a.m. at about 6.7 meters, while low tide was expected around 4:40 p.m., marking more than a 4-meter change in just a few hours. Experts stress that to make the most of the summer weather safely, beachgoers should take regular breaks in the shade or under parasols, as prolonged outdoor activity can increase the risk of heat-related illness. Shin So-eun, Arirang News.
U.S. President Donald Trump has imposed new tariffs on minimum import prices on polysilicon-related products in a bid to curb low-cost imports and strengthen domestic supply chains. Our Park Ko-nu has this report.
A 15% tariff on products derived from polysilicon, a key material for semiconductors and solar panels, will be put into effect by the U.S. on December 4th. That comes after U.S. President Donald Trump signed a proclamation on Thursday local time, saying the measure was necessary to ensure that imports of polysilicon and its derivatives do not threaten the country's national security.
This is a series of trade and tariff actions under Section 232 intended to ensure that domestic polysilicon manufacturing is properly supported and protected from overseas dumping and offshore threats.
Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act gives the U.S. President the authority to restrict imports through tariffs or other measures if they're deemed a threat to national security. Thursday's measure also sets minimum import prices at $21 per kilogram for polysilicon and $100 per kilogram for polysilicon ingots and wafers, aimed at preventing dumping of low-cost imports while protecting U.S. producers. The measures also cover products used in the solar industry, as Washington seeks to strengthen the domestic solar supply chain that has long relied heavily on foreign production. Trump said the measures would also help bring chip manufacturing back to the U.S.
We'll have a big percentage of the chip business by the time I leave office, and we're bringing the chip business back into the United States in a very big way.
The order also includes incentives to encourage U.S. production of polysilicon and its derivatives, while authorizing the Commerce Secretary to make company-specific deals to promote such investments. Companies with approved plans to expand production in the U.S. may also receive tariff exemptions on some equipment and materials needed for their investments. While the tariffs will not take effect immediately, the administration says it will restrict imports by companies found to be stockpiling polysilicon or its derivatives ahead of their implementation. 박건우, Arirang News.
With the 15% tariff set to take effect in 4 months, attention now turns to how South Korean firms will be affected. Our Baek Ju-hee has the details.
While Washington's latest trade curbs on polysilicon and its derivatives pose a direct threat to Chinese competitors, the outlook for Korea remains mixed. Because tariffs for Korea are structured so that the combined rate totals 15%, including existing general tariffs and Section 232 duties, Korean firms avoid the heavy stacked duties and minimum import price hurdles hitting Chinese rivals. The impact on Korean firms, however, depends on their manufacturing strategy. Because local production gains the same shield against low-cost Chinese imports, Korean firms with U.S. bases can secure a stronger competitive edge. For example, solar giant Hanwha Qcells welcomed the move, as its massive Georgia solar hub stands to gain from the squeeze on Chinese imports while maximizing benefits under the U.S. Advanced Manufacturing Production Credit for local production.
As raw material sourcing becomes critical across the solar supply chain, this is a clear opportunity to reduce our reliance on China and stabilize U.S. supply chains. The 15% tariff is not just a cost burden, but a turning point to bolster long-term competitiveness.
However, material suppliers could face higher costs and stricter origin tracking if they rely on Asian supply chains for raw materials. Consequently, if solar module prices go up, installation expenses will naturally rise for both solar developers and everyday consumers.
Suppliers providing materials to local U.S. semiconductor plants may face reduced margins and drawbacks. However, the damage is likely to be far more pronounced in the solar cell sector due to its significantly higher shipping volumes.
Experts stress that the key lies in the final implementation details, including exemption scopes and price controls. While non-Chinese supply chain players could gain under targeted restrictions, more extensive rules could raise cost burdens, leaving Korean companies carefully watching for the final outcome. Baek Ju-hee, Arirang News.
U.S. President Donald Trump says the war with Iran could come to an end soon, though questions remain over America's weapons stockpile. Now, meanwhile, concerns are growing over the death of Iran's supreme leader. Kim So-young has the latest.
U.S. President Donald Trump says he believes the war with Iran could be over soon, as questions grow over American weapons supplies and negotiations continue over shipping through the Strait of Hormuz.
And we'll see those days pretty soon again, based on everything I see, as soon as the war ends. And I think it's going to end pretty soon. I don't think they can go much longer. Yeah.
Speaking to reporters Thursday, Trump also acknowledged that the U.S. military has faced supply issues with some weapons, but said that the U.S. has an unlimited supply of most ammunition.
We have certain types of munitions that are very powerful, that we have virtual unlimited supply. We have others where it's a little bit tighter, and we're getting them in on a daily basis.
His comments come after Reuters reported that the U.S. Army had used much of its global stockpile of highly accurate, long-range missiles during the 5-month conflict with Iran. Trump also threatened to seek long prison sentences for anyone found responsible for leaking sensitive information about U.S. weapon supplies. Meanwhile, according to the Iranian dissident outlet Iran Wire, Iran's supreme leader Mustafa Khamenei, who has never appeared in public since succeeding his father, is reportedly in grave condition. Citing sources close to President Pezeshkian's administration, the report says Khamenei has had no contact with government ministers and that rumors are spreading among senior regime officials that his life is in immediate danger. He was reportedly wounded in the late February strike that killed his father. He was absent even from his father's funeral last month. President Pezeshkian said in an interview broadcast on state television this week that communication with the supreme leader has become very difficult. Kim Seoyoung, Arirang News.
North Korea has remained silent on Thursday's short-range ballistic missile launch, with experts saying the move may be calculated ahead of upcoming South Korea-U.S. military drills. Kim Do-yeon explains.
North Korea fired a short-range ballistic missile from the Wonsan area into the East Sea on Thursday, but on Friday, its state media has remained noticeably silent. Experts view this blackout as a deliberate maneuver tied to the upcoming ROK-US Ulchi Freedom Shield military exercises.
The fact that North Korea did not report this suggests we cannot rule out the possibility of a concentrated batch report either during or at the conclusion of the Ulchi Freedom Shield exercise.
South Korean and U.S. intelligence authorities have similarly withheld detailed flight metrics for this launch. This, experts see it as protecting tracking assets and maintaining strategic operational security. Military assessments classify the tested weapon within North Korea's short-range ballistic missile arsenal, the same 400 to 600-kilometer class systems currently deployed in Eastern Europe. According to foreign media citing Ukrainian defense intelligence reports, Pyongyang has dispatched roughly 90 specialized missile crew members to Russia to assist with operating KN-23 and KN-24 systems. While the foreign reports indicate these battlefield deployments allow North Korea to gather real-world data and refine guidance accuracy, there are also voices from diplomatic analysts noting that Ukraine may also be highlighting the North Korean threat to rally broader Western military support. All in all, South Korea's Ministry of National Defense emphasizes that South Korean and U.S. forces are closely tracking all related developments, maintaining tight intelligence sharing and robust joint defense capabilities. Allied forces reaffirm that the combined military posture remains fully equipped to detect and counter any short-range ballistic missile threats along the Central Front. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
K-pop and Korean dramas may have opened the door to the Korean wave, but more foreign visitors are now looking deeper into the country's traditional culture. Korea's traditional music, Gugak, is emerging as a new way for international tourists to experience the nation. For more, we have our culture correspondent, Jung Hae-rim, here in the studio. Happy Friday, Jung Hae-rim.
Happy Friday, Dami.
Sorry, Hae-rim. Now, Hae-rim, we're hearing Gugak is becoming increasingly popular among foreign tourists. Tell us what you saw on the ground.
Right, Dami. So I recently joined a class at the National Gugak Center, and the energy there was absolutely incredible. I could completely see why the sessions fill up so quickly. Let's take a look. While many Koreans grow up encountering the instrument at least once, for these Japanese students, it's entirely new.
They are hesitant and shy at first when trying to play the tanggu, a traditional Korean drum, because of its unfamiliar shape and size. But within minutes, the classroom transforms into an energetic session of resounding drums and vibrant laughter. The National Gugak Center says more foreign visitors are now seeking opportunities to take classes like this, where they can experience traditional Korean music firsthand.
Many of these students are seeing tanggu for the first time, but the thunderous beat filling the room proves that they may be slowly falling in love with one of Korea's oldest instruments.
It is very fun. Korean unique instrument is very interesting for me, so I enjoy it very much.
It was difficult to catch up at first because the movements were quite fast, but it was fun at the end when all the sounds of different instruments came together.
The growing interest can also be seen in live performances. From January through July, more than 2,000 foreign visitors attended the Gugak Center's signature Saturday Gugak concert, accounting for roughly 1 in every 3 audience members. Meanwhile, a free English language program introducing traditional instruments at the center's museum has also drawn hundreds of foreign participants this year.
With K-culture gaining huge popularity through global icons like BTS's Arirang and traditional elements in K-pop Demon Hunters, foreign interest in Gugak has surged. Also, as inbound tourism recovers, we have prepared specialized performances and hands-on programs tailored for international guests.
To meet this demand, Korea is ramping up efforts to offer closer, more intimate cultural experiences. At the 40-seat Ongi concert, audiences can watch pansori, a traditional form of Korean musical storytelling, up close and entirely unamplified without microphones. After the show, visitors can speak directly with the artists, try out traditional instruments for themselves, and even dress in hanbok. As the Korean wave expands beyond pop music and television, more international visitors are discovering the sounds at the roots of Korean culture. By stepping into intimate concert halls and taking part in hands-on workshops, these foreign travelers are connecting with a heritage that is as living and dynamic as modern K-pop itself.
Now, Gugak can feel quite difficult even for Koreans, so it's nice to see, fascinating to see these students enjoying it so much. Now, Herim, what's behind this so much interest?
Right, Dami, that's what caught my attention as well. Gugak is pretty difficult. So one major driver is that traditional music is appearing much more frequently in mainstream K content, which has really lowered the barrier for international audiences. We've seen Korean mythology and traditional elements featured prominently in media like K-pop Demon Hunters, while BTS put Arirang, one of Korea's best-known folk songs, front and center on the global stage. And another major factor is a shift toward active immersion. Today's tourists just don't want to watch, they want to experience the roots of Korean culture firsthand. We're seeing a surge in demand not only for traditional music workshops, but also for museum souvenirs known locally as mute. In fact, recent performing arts data shows that ticket bookings for traditional music have jumped nearly 20% year over year, with international visitors making up more than a third of the audience at major venues.
That is fascinating indeed. Now, Herim, do you think Gugak could eventually become a major mainstream tourist attraction moving forward?
I hope so, Dami. There's so much to Korean music, more than K-pop, and the tourism industry is really starting to tap into that potential.
We're still discussing the details, but we're looking into ways to work more closely with overseas and local travel agencies and develop those partnerships further.
And I think accessibility will be the key. Gugak has to be easy to find, easy to understand, and something they can take part in. And if that happens, today's K-pop fan could become tomorrow's Gugak tourist.
I do hope the future of Gugak tourism is bright. Herim, thanks for coming in tonight.
My pleasure.
Today marked Ipchu, the start of autumn on the Korean calendar, but it certainly didn't feel like fall is near. The brutal heat continued, especially across western regions, and the nights aren't giving us much of a break either. Seoul has been dealing with more than 2 weeks of tropical nights, while Jeju Island is on day 31. With all the humidity in the mix, overnight temperatures will barely budge, making for another extremely hot and uncomfortable night. Meanwhile, the East Coast will see rain tomorrow and Sunday, with more than 150 millimeters possible in the mountainous and coastal areas of Gangwon-do province. And tomorrow, we could also see some loud, sudden downpours popping up in parts of the country, including Seoul. Seoul will reach 35 degrees Celsius tomorrow before dropping to 33 on Sunday and Monday. But that doesn't mean we're done with the heat just yet. Hot days and tropical nights will stick around, with temperatures staying well above the seasonal average into next week. Now here's a look at the weather around the world.
That is all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. From all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.
For thousands of years, one breath has endured. More than a martial art, it is the Korean way of life. Taekwondo, connecting the world. Smarter than ever, Taekwondo leaps toward a new future, connecting the world through a single movement. The spirit of Korea meets the boundless energy of K-pop. No longer just a sport, Taekwondo is at the heart of K-culture, bringing Korea's spirit to the world. A beautiful culture, connecting heart to heart. We now strive to safeguard Taekwondo's community training culture as a treasured heritage for all humanity. The pride of Korea, Taekwondo.
drawing more fans from all over the world.
Local consumer prices continue to hover at the 2% consensus rate in April.
Turning to robots to allow the visually impaired the chance to better indulge in cultural experiences.
Like the number of hybrid cars registered in South Korea has surpassed 2 million using
this locally developed Yuri rocket.
Arirang. When did it all begin? The beginning of joy embedded in daily life, where steps of learning meet a bigger world, and history coexists. The legend continues. Innovative technologies come together to unfold a new future, building a better tomorrow. A joy accessible to all, always present in your daily life. JDC.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gen. Iran and Oman appear close to a temporary deal to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, offering a possible path towards easing months of conflict. But major differences remain over Iran's role in managing the waterway, with President Trump says he wants a deal with Tehran, but has kept his position on the Hormuz proposal unclear. Now, at the same time, fears of a wider conflict are growing after Iran warned that another U.S. strike could put energy infrastructure across the Gulf at risk. Now, with Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states pushing for diplomacy, could the region finally be moving towards a breakthrough? For a deeper analysis on this, we connect to Seung-Hoon Baek, a researcher at the Institute of Middle East Studies. Good to see you.
Nice to see you again.
And also joining us is Robert Lawrence, senior researcher at the Institute of Middle East and African Affairs. A very big welcome.
Thank you for having me on tonight. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too. Now let's begin our discussion right away with the latest with Dr. Lawrence first. So like I've said, Iran and Oman are close to a temporary deal to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. If that happens, how significant could that be?
Right, well, I have some pretty serious reservations about the durability of any potential Oman-Iran agreement for several reasons. Maybe more than I can actually address in this question, but one big obstacle that stands out, the most obvious one, is that, and we don't know the actual granular details of the deal yet, but through open source data, they're saying that Iran's going to control the incoming traffic into the strait. This has very serious implications with secondary and tertiary consequences that would affect regional and global politics. So again, I have my doubts about the world accepting a deal that would empower Iran to that degree. But hypothetically, if it happens, it could be a paradigm shift. It would be a political strategic defeat for the U.S., despite overwhelming tactical success, and it would be an astounding political victory for Iran and arguably its global allies, Russia and China, despite Iran taking significant losses while fighting a global superpower. So I think it would be extremely significant if the conflict ended this way, but I doubt very much that the U.S. will capitulate to those demands.
Right, indeed. But even though it wouldn't be an actual full reopening, Iran would still have a role in managing shipping. Then how much leverage would that give Tehran, Dr. Baek?
I would call it a significant strategic gain for Iran, but as Dr. Lawrence has said, but we could not say it is a complete strategic victory for Iran for time being. So the most important point is that Iran appears to have transformed something it achieved through military coercion during the war into a possible institutional role after the fighting. So before the war, the basic international expectation was that the Strait of Hormuz should function as an international waterway where commercial vessels could transit without requiring political approval from Tehran. But under the proposal now being discussed, Iran would retain some operational role in managing shipping, while Oman would also have a role on the southern side of the strait. So one proposal reported by the AP would effectively divide responsibility with Iran overseeing traffic entering the Gulf and Oman handling outbound traffic. So if that arrangement is implemented, and Tehran could argue that the post-war order recognized that the Strait of Hormuz cannot be managed without Iran. That matters because Iran suffered very significant military losses during this war. So its air defenses, missile infrastructures, and command structures were badly damaged. So from Tehran's perspective, retaining the leverage over Strait of Hormuz allowed it to say, we may have lost militarily, but we are not strategically eliminated. And it will bring a future administration and maritime services of Strait in consultation with Iran. We're going to give a significant leverage for Iran for next negotiation phases and process. So we could say it's a strategic game, but again, United States will not gonna submissive to all the demands and the ask of like Iran. So we have to see what will be the agreement from the both party.
Right. So as Dr. Beck has mentioned, clearly Washington is pushing back. The U.S. rejects Iranian control over the shipping through the strait. Dr. Lawrence, why is that such a red line? Please elaborate for us.
This is kind of the crux of the matter, to be honest. Like Dr. Beck said, the U.S. expects this to be an international waterway with a free flow of traffic. And if this goes in the way of Iran actually controlling incoming traffic, it would cross a number of red lines with Washington. Domestically, this would be a bit of a disaster for the administration going into the midterms. This war has been unpopular. It's expensive. It's taken a heavy toll on critical munitions that might be needed for other potential conflicts. And the U.S. has lost young men and young women, and hundreds of people have been hurt. So if the result of these sacrifices is that Iran ends up controlling the Strait of Hormuz, which it did not before the conflict started, then I think both the midterms and Donald Trump's legacy are increasingly vulnerable. Internationally, it would empower its adversaries, in the conflict, which that implies a strategic defeat in and of itself, right? Despite all the tactical success. Owning the strait or being able to control the strait is more than just about oil. You'll control about 20% of global oil and LNG. But it would also effectively give Iran control over about a third of the world's global seaborne fertilizer and helium, which is a key component in superconductor manufacturing. But it also gives about 20% or control over 20% of jet fuel, seaborne jet fuel in the global supply chain. So, this effectively would make Iran a major center of global power and politics, which is a big change. Just before the conflict began, it seemed like they were fairly isolated without, besides a couple of global partners that have been helping it. Regionally, Iran would have an unprecedented amount of leverage over its Gulf neighbors, especially states like Bahrain or Qatar or Iraq, Kuwait, who they rely on the strait for 100% of their seaborne trade. Collectively, this would enable Iran to basically leverage the world's economy to achieve its desired outcomes. So if this is the outcome, it's going to negatively affect the U.S.'s deterrence capability and therefore its reliability as a security guarantor. But additionally, if Iran is allowed to charge fees, which it says it's going to do, this would undermine or at least raise a lot of questions about the efficacy of the international sanction regime on Iran. So, I think when you take all these together, there are just too many red lines being crossed. I think most in Washington will not be in favor of this outcome, and I think it may be stillborn.
Right. So this control, it really means a lot, just more than what it seems to be. And another sticking point that among these red lines that we've mentioned is, of course, this transit fees. Iran wants to charge for maritime services, while the U.S. opposes any fees. Dr. Beck, how much could this further complicate a deal?
I think this dispute is much more about authority than money. I mean, there is an important distinction between legitimate maritime services charge and political control. If a coastal state provides a specific services such as pilotage, rescue operation, environmental protection, mine clearances, or navigation assistance, it is possible to charge a transparent fee for that particular service. So we see comparable, and we see comparable arrangement in other major waterways in same manner. But Iran is seeking something much broader. I mean, Tehran has been discussing charges amounting to roughly 5 to 7% of cargo value, while Oman has floated something closer to 3%. So, and now, as you mentioned, Washington position is essentially zero compulsory transit fee, which Iran is also considering restriction on vessel belonging to state it regards as hostile and potentially very large penalties for violating those restrictions. But once the payment is calculated as a percentage of a cargo rather than the actual cost of maritime services, it begins to look much less like a service charges and much more like a toll for permission to pass. And that has enormous strategic implication. If ship has to pay Iran in order to enter or leave the Gulf, then Iran is not simply providing maritime services. This is exactly what Washington fears. The United States is concerned not only about what happens in Hormuz today, but also about the president. So if a country can use military forces to disrupt on international trade and then institutionalize a toll system as part of the peace settlement, other strategic waterway could eventually face similar political claims. So I think this is something that the United States really not fear, but biggest concern. So I don't see, we have to wait and see how it will goes, but maybe best way is service charge. But if Iran started to say, oh, we're going to charge some fee based on values of cargo, and if they decide to prevent or restrict certain like states of vessel in terms of their condition, then it will be unacceptable for United States. So it will gonna lead to prolonged negotiations. So we have to see. But now this is a beginning, initial phase of the negotiation. That's why Iran is raising the bar, saying like we're gonna charge 7% or 5%. But I don't think it will be the end deal for the term. So we'll have to watch and see how it goes.
Right, so we're still on negotiation terms, actually. But even so, you know, the U.S. is really opposing this control of the strait. But President Trump, he said he still wants a deal with Iran. Dr. Lawrence, how do you read Washington's strategy at this point?
You know, the messaging has been a little bit confusing, but from all actors involved, right? The U.S. says it's negotiating with Iran. Iran denies this and insists it's only talking to Oman. And then President Trump says that a deal is close. It'll be in the next couple days, and threatens the resumption of kinetic strikes if one isn't met, if there's not a deal made. And then you know, he and other officials in the administration are implying that the strait will not be controlled by any party in any way, saying exactly what they expect that deal to look like. You know, so this has been a bit confusing regarding the strategy coming from Washington. You know, President Trump has certain goals he wants to achieve, I think, but whether or not he has a strategy to achieve those goals kind of remains a little bit difficult to ascertain. Sometimes his actions closely resemble Richard Nixon's madman strategy, where unpredictability and the willingness to escalate are designed to keep adversaries kind of off balance, right? But this very same unpredictability and the willingness to change course makes some people think that he's just reacting to changes on the ground and doesn't actually have a strategy. Whether he can turn the past year's tactical wins into strategic political achievements will better indicate the presence or absence of real strategy. But, you know, madman strategy can really only be judged by the outcome. You can't really judge that halfway through. So we're going to have to really wait and see if this is part of a strategy or if there are a bunch of tactical wins. You know, on the other hand, there is a risk of what people in policy circles often refer to as mirror imaging. And this is when one side thinks that the adversary thinks the same way they do on the matter, and therefore they're going to act as a rational actor should act the same way they would act, and in this case, it would be to make a deal. That would be a mistake. The Iranians are not thinking the same way that we do about election cycles. They think that they have a higher pain threshold and a greater will to kind of wait out the conflict. So we're going to have to wait and see how this pans out, I think, before we can start addressing, the presence or absence of a strategy, because the president plays his cards very close to his chest, right? Mm-hmm. He doesn't give away a lot of information. He distrusts the press. He distrusts the State Department. So I think it's a little bit difficult for people outside of his circle to really know whether or not there is a grand strategy, despite all of the abundance of speculation that we kind of hear in the news. I will argue that I think he wants to go into the midterms with something to show. And then there's also a very important question about what happens after the midterms, regardless of the outcomes of the midterms. There's going to be a period between the midterms and the next Congress coming in where there's a window where things can change very drastically.
Right, definitely.
One more thing, tactically right now, I think Washington's just trying to exhaust all other options before returning to strikes. Remember, he's a deal maker. That's what he prides himself on being. He prefers to make a deal, but I don't think he'll hesitate to try to use coercive tactics, use force to get them back to the negotiation tables, as he's done over the last year.
Right. So again, we are just speculating at this point, and we will really have to see what this unpredictability and this confusion would mean from Washington. But of course, the risk of escalation is still remaining. Iran says another U.S. strike could trigger attacks on the Gulf energy infrastructure. Dr. Beck, how serious do you think is that threat?
I mean, they should be taken very seriously, although I would not interpret them as evidence that Iran necessarily wants on all-out war with Gulf states. But this is fundamentally a strategy of coercive deterrence of Iran. So Iran understands that it cannot match the United States conventionally. What it can do is raise the cost of an American attack by threatening countries whose territory, bases and infrastructures are essential to United States operation in the region. Tehran has warned Gulf states that another major U.S. strike could result in attack against oil fields, electricity grids, water infrastructures, and transport network across all the Middle Eastern region. And even Iranian Foreign Minister Arakchi conveyed a warning through contact involving Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey, and Pakistan about this particularly there's a possibility that they're going to attack this critical infrastructures. So because of relatively small numbers of oil processing facilities, LNG terminals, desalination plants, ports, and electricity networks support very large part of this country's economies, like that I mentioned, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Kuwait, and other Gulf states. So damaging one facility can therefore have consequences far beyond the immediate military effect. And Iran has demonstrated both capability and willingness in this area. And if we remember, I mean, the 2019 attacks on Saudi Aramco showed how drones and cruise missiles could temporarily disrupt a major share of Saudi production. So, and even during this current war, Gulf civilian and energy infrastructures has again been exposed to Iranian missile and drones attack. And the conflict has demonstrated the vulnerabilities of Gulf states despite their huge investment in security and that protecting energy, water, and economic infrastructures. So, but having, even if I said all this, but I think Iran's political objective is even more important than military threat itself. So Tehran is effectively telling Gulf capitals, say, if Washington escalates, you will also pay the prices. Therefore, you should restrain Washington. That is the tactic of Iran. But however, I have to mention this, Leslie, but even though Tehran is using this tactic, there is also a limit to this strategy. If Iran goes too far and systematically attacks Saudi, Qatari, Kuwaiti, and Emirati infrastructures, it could produce exactly the opposite result. The Gulf state could move from mediation toward to collective military containment of Iran. And if that happens, Iran has had to face another threat other than United States. So Iran has to play this carefully. It's like kind of like playing with the fire.
Right, that really shows how quickly another strike could spill beyond Iran itself. So as Dr. Beck has just pointed out, the warning has pushed Gulf states towards diplomacy as well. Saudi Arabia and others have urged Washington to resume talks. Dr. Lawrence, how important is their role in preventing a wider conflict?
All right, well, different Gulf states have reacted to the conflict in different ways, but they have demonstrated that they have President Trump's ear at crucial times during the conflict, especially Saudi Arabia. During Project Freedom back in May, when the U.S. tried to open the Strait up by force, Saudi Arabia prevented the U.S. from following through on the operation because of a lack of notification. And just last week, ostensibly, Mohammed bin Salman was able to convince Donald Trump to give talks another chance instead of launching a massive attack. So, they're showing their influence. There's no doubt about it. Regarding, prevention of a wider regional conflict, we aren't seeing the whole region engaging in offensive operations, but I think it's important to recognize the regional nature of the conflict because it's been one of the principal strategies of one of the belligerents in the conflict, and fighting through proxies counts. By my count, I think 14 or 15 countries have been attacked by Iran and its proxies during the war. And Iran, along with proxies in 3 regional countries, have been attacked. Additionally, right now, Yemen might be on the precipice of another civil war. Saudi Arabia is taking a more offensive posture. Turkey, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia are reported to be on the verge of signing a defense pact as of a couple of hours ago. And Israel is intensifying strikes on Lebanon and Gaza. So while there's not an all-out regional shooting war happening right now, the whole region is involved, and the outcomes have very serious consequences for the entire region.
Right. Then, Dr. Beck, do you think this could mean that the Gulf states have greater influence over Washington and Tehran now?
Yes, I think this is one of the most important structural consequences of war. I mean, the Gulf states are moving from being passive arena of U.S. Iran competition to achieve stakeholders in managing that competition. So their influences come from geography. U.S. military operation depends heavily on bases, airspaces, ports, and logistics in Gulf. At the same time, those countries are directly exposed to Iranian missile and drones. They also control infrastructure that determines the global economic cost of conflict. I'm not going to repeat it again. And increasingly, Gulf states control important diplomatic channels. Like as we've been seeing several months, Oman is central to the technical negotiation over Hormuz. Qatar has carried ceasefire proposal, and Saudi Arabia has used its direct relationship with President Trump to push for de-escalation. But greater influences does not mean a vetoes. I mean, Washington can still attack Iran, and Tehran can still escalate. And importantly, there is no single Gulf position. Saudi Arabia and Qatar have generally favored de-escalation. Oman emphasized mediation, while UAE has taken a harder approach, like taking a side with United States. So this points to something bigger. The post-war order is unlikely to become a simple U.S.-Israel Gulf bloc against Iran. So the Gulf state still wants American security guarantees, and some will cooperate with Israel and intelligences and missile defenses, but they also want direct channel with Iran and stronger ties with Turkey, Pakistan, China, and other partners. So I have to say, the Gulf states are no longer simply the arena in which Washington and Tehran compete. They are increasingly shaping the rules of that competition. So now the influences of a Gulf state are enlarging right now in this moment.
It's really growing, but still at this point, there's nothing really we can guarantee at this point. So we'll really have to see how things would unfold. But we'll have to leave our discussion right here tonight. Dr. Beck, thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you for having me to your show again.
And of course, Dr. Lawrence as well. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me on tonight.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame tonight. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.
to set the facts straight. Get Korea right.